Good morning and happy Friday to you. You're watching BloombergQuint. I'm Alex Matthew and this is all you need to know. First, the headlines. The Reserve Bank of India announces the third round of its version of Operation Twist. It will buy long-term bonds maturing in 3 different years while simultaneously selling short-term bonds. NMDC hikes prices of its lump and fine ore by 200 rupees each per ton each, marking its first price hike in 8 months. After reporting a default on a loan repayment on Wednesday, Peninsula Land repays 2.35 crore rupees to State Bank of India, which is part of the 177 crore rupee secured loan raised by the company. JSW Energy enters a pact with Jayaprakash Power Ventures to restructure its 751 crore rupees of outstanding debt. Of the said amount, 280 crore rupees will be written off by JSW Energy. And Asian markets are off to a positive start after the S&P 500 made a record high on its first trading day of the new year. In fact, let's talk about that. US markets resumed trade on Thursday in what was their first trading day of 2020. The S&P 500 registered a record high with Nike, Apple and Alphabet all posting record high levels. Gains were led by technology shares, which aided the outperformance of the Nasdaq Composite as well. Renita Young of Bloomberg News sums up Thursday's Wall Street action in this report.
U.S. stocks extended its record high on Thursday, closing out the first trading day of 2020 in an everything rally. Investors cheered on the China Central Bank move to continue to support its economy. During the session, we saw a lot of movers. One of them was Tesla, trading near a record high as its price target was raised at Canaccord. Wells Fargo cut its price target at Hanes brand. The stock fell because of that. And Amazon and Google are heading to the Consumer Electronics Show and will premiere digital assistance technology. Both stocks rose on that news. During the session, we also saw a strength in treasuries despite the rally in stocks. The U.S. dollar was higher despite a rally also in gold. Those hardly ever happen since gold is priced in the U.S. dollar. And on Friday, we'll see ISM manufacturing data as well as the latest minutes from the Fed, the latest Fed meeting. And that's a look at your Wall Street action on Thursday. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, let's also take a look at the Asian markets. I'm joined live by Sophie Kamruddin, who's joining us from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. Very positive cues heading into the trading session in Asia this morning. How are we looking right now, Sophie?
Yeah, Alex, we're taking that rally that we saw on Wall Street and running with it here in Asia, with the regional benchmark extending gains at a June 2018 high. You have gains of over 1% in Sydney, Seoul, as well as here in Hong Kong. The Hang Seng adding 1.2%. And in Sydney, we have banks among the biggest gainers, while in Seoul, the Kospi is being led higher by Samsung. This is chip makers in the region and across the globe are seen having some impetus to make more advances as we get a growing analyst optimism around the chip sector. Overnight, we had AMD among the stocks gaining ground in the U.S. This after Nomura raised its price target. And here in Asia, we had Samsung resuming production at a factory after halting the output yesterday. And that's seen perhaps hitting some of the DRAM supply and quickening a 2020 price recovery for that space. Now on the mainland, we are seeing gains for Chinese stocks. The CSI 300 extending its advance by 0.25%, and the Shanghai Composite continuing to tick higher after breaking through a technical hurdle at 3,050 points, which had quashed rallies for the benchmark since May of last year. Now we are seeing in the currency space some upside for the yen, adding 0.2%. This after it rose to an 8-week high against the greenback overnight, and we're watching for the dollar yen to break through the 100-day moving average, which could portend a move for the Japanese currency towards the 106 level. This as we're seeing continued losses for the dollar index, off 0.1%. This as we're getting more momentum around calls for global growth to continue. And I also want to highlight just very quickly the offshore yuan just holding steady below that 7 handle. This, as we saw a little reaction as well to the news that the PBOC had boosted liquidity for Chinese banks. So overall, it looks like we're on an upward path for Asian stocks this Friday. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Sophie. Now, all of this is leading from the US rally that took place. In fact, everything rallied, as you were just told. But the trajectory of asset classes like the dollar and the 10-year Treasury yield in the US, along with haven assets like gold, depends on the policy measures taken up by the US Federal Reserve. Now, ahead of their meeting later this month, it seems as though the Fed is heading for an indefinite policy pause. Kathleen Hayes of Bloomberg News tells you why.
That's what the Fed signaled at the December 11th meeting after it was also pausing after 3 rate cuts. So rather than continuing that path or heading toward a hike, it looks like when you look at the dots, let's jump into the Bloomberg now and see dots go. This is like the one picture worth maybe 10,000 words, because this is the FOMC members. This is 13 of 17 who predicted that based on what they see in terms of the economy, inflation not getting out of control, economic growth probably around potential 2%, they're not predicting a need to hike or cut rates. While 4, obviously a minority, are saying, well, maybe there's a chance we'll raise the key rate just once. Now, of course, at the press conference after the December 11th meeting, Jay Powell, the Fed chair, made it pretty clear that the Fed will need to see a material change in this economic outlook to move on rates. In other words, not just a little move in either direction, but something fairly big. And when I spoke to Rob Kaplan, president of Dallas Fed, on December 17th, he echoed Jay Powell's words. Let's listen to what he said.
There has to be a material change in the outlook, either for better or for worse. I've already got baked into my outlook. We're going to have weak manufacturing next year, sluggish global growth, pretty sluggish business investment, but with a strong consumer. There would have to be some material change from that outlook.
So in other words, not just a little weakness in manufacturing because the impact of the trade war lingers, but something more severe to look at, a cut, for example. Now, Rob Kaplan leads us to the Fed's annual shift in who votes at the FOMC meetings, because 4 Fed bank presidents, remember there's 12 bank presidents overall, rotate that vote. So if we call up this chart, you can see we're going to start on the dovish side, okay? Charlie Evans and Jim Bullard, Chicago Fed and St. Louis Fed, were voters. They no longer are. But Neil Kashkari, who was a very dovish FOMC member, Minneapolis Fed president, gets a vote. We put Rob Kaplan in the middle, president of Dallas, because he's kind of a centrist. He gains the vote. And you just heard what he said. He's not penciling in anything for 2020. Now, on the hawkish side, Patrick Harker, president of the Philly Fed, Loretta Mester from the Cleveland Fed, they get the votes, while 2 hawks, Eric Rosengren from Boston, Esther George from Kansas City Fed, are losing the vote. Remember, they dissented against every rate cut in 2019. So we'll see does this make a difference? Well, it remains to see if we get that material change in the outlook. For now, people figure, at least at this January meeting at the end of the month, no change of any kind, maybe not even a change in the wording of the policy statement.
All right, let's turn to Australia, where Prime Minister Scott Morrison was heckled by bushfire survivors as he visited a small town that was devastated earlier this week, in which 2 residents were killed. Ed Johnson has more details on this.
Just yesterday, we were speculating as to whether this kind of tremendous outpouring of anger that we've seen on Twitter and Facebook would cross over from that echo chamber of social media and enter the real world. And yesterday it did. The Prime Minister visited the town of Cobargo, where 2 people died early this week in bushfires, and you've seen the reception that he got there. Elsewhere during the visit, people refused to shake his hand, including a volunteer firefighter. More embarrassing images that just keep on playing on television. And also the Liberal Transport Minister in New South Wales State, Andrew Constance, a member of Morrison's own party, said that he probably deserved that reception and should think about opening his checkbook so that communities can start rebuilding their lives.
Of course, we know that the Conservatives have really tried to downplay the link between the huge wildfires and climate change. What are some of the missteps that the Prime Minister really carried out during this crisis that's leading to this sort of reception?
First and foremost, he took a holiday pre-Christmas. He went away with his family to Hawaii and left the country without announcing it, as is usually quite typical when an Australian Prime Minister leaves the country. They announce who their deputy is going to be during that period. He cancelled that trip and came back early after two volunteer firefighters died. He's largely been accused of lacking in empathy and having a tin ear. Whilst people have been incredibly shocked and shell-shocked and traumatised by these huge fire fronts bearing down on their communities, and yet the Prime Minister has been seen meeting cricketers ahead of a cricket test and talking about sport at a time when they said he should be visiting those bushfire-ravaged communities.
All right, let's see what else is making headlines across the globe. Rosalind Chin of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
Carlos Ghosn has denied reports his wife and other family members helped organize his escape to Lebanon. He says he put together the getaway plan on his own. Still not clear how exactly Ghosn snuck out of the country, evading round-the-clock surveillance. Prosecutors have begun a search of Ghosn's Tokyo residence, where he'd been under house arrest. Bloomberg's learned that political reasons are behind China's temporary halt on the link between the Shanghai and London stock exchanges. We've been told the UK's stance on the Hong Kong protests is one of the issues driving the decision. The London-Shanghai link was designed to allow companies listed on one exchange to also issue shares on the other. Turkey's parliament has authorized deploying troops to support Libya's internationally recognized administration against rival forces. The Libyan government is battling militias backed by Russian mercenaries, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. The White House says President Trump spoke to Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan about the move, warning him that foreign interference is complicating the situation. The US is warning Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez that his early foreign policy moves may jeopardize support from the IMF and American investment. A senior Trump administration official says that sheltering former Bolivian President Evo Morales and engaging with Nicolas Maduro's regime in Venezuela could cost Argentina backing for new IMF funding and US investment in shale. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Rosalind Chin. This is Bloomberg.
All right, let's take a look at how we're set up for trade this Friday. Agam Vakil is joining me to tell you all about that and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, today is one day when you can clearly say that the global cues are fantastic going into trade today, so we're likely to see a positive start.
Absolutely, Alex, and it was evident in the kind of up move that we saw yesterday as well. The SGX Nifty futures clearly indicating gains today. We're seeing about a 0.3% up move here, and well, as I was saying, yesterday turned out to be a really good day for trade for as the indices advanced by around 0.8%. The mid cap and the small cap indices also advancing by good momentum coming through as well. That wasn't any different for the banking indices. But let's take a look at ADRs. And of course, what we have here is gains coming in with very strong gains too. So something like a Tata Motors, ICICI Bank, Vedanta, all of them. Well, we don't have too much to go for otherwise. But again, as I was suggesting, that there has been a lot of buying coming through. FIs are starting plowing in, and this time it was a stock worth 689 odd crores. DIs are not doing too much, but they're also buying on a net basis. And moving on to your contributors, it was Reliance Industries, HDFC Limited, L&T, HDFC Bank, but were the large cap heavyweights leading to gains on the indices, and nothing to show for as far as TCS and Infosys is concerned. Even though they did decline, they really didn't contribute too much towards the declines. But as far as futures and options go, and that's where things are looking a little more interesting, there are fresh longs coming in. Do remember, a lot of participants will be back. Institutional as well as HNIs along with retail and participants will be back from the holidays, and they will now start putting in, and which is why we may very well see an increase in turnovers, not only in the cash markets, but in the futures and options space as well. The Nifty banking futures also looking at, not too much traction, a little bit of unwinding, but gains all the same. And coming down to your options of 500-point range between 12,000 and 12,500, we are somewhere in the middle of that. In terms of change in open interest, because we saw the Nifty move higher, well, naturally, we saw a little more writing around the 12,200 put as well. But what is also surprising is that 12,300 call has seen writing. Well, we saw the indices move higher, which is why we also saw the wicks come off to a certain extent. But the Nifty put call ratio will have also edged higher to around 1.5 against 1.1. And in terms of stocks, I'm sure there are a lot of them which we have seen buying coming through. The cement stocks did very well yesterday. Ramco Cements is one of them. Longs coming in. So, well, the media stocks, on the other hand, under a tad bit of pressure. PVR was along with Sun TV. And Mindtree also continuing its move upwards with some gains coming on. Eicher Motors, of course, reacting to the poor commercial vehicle sales for the month of December. Escorts, Sale, Apollo Tyres, among others, which did see a lot of traction and, in fact, short covering. So, Alex, most likely building on the gains that we saw yesterday. Let's just wait and watch whether or not that does come through.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, let's talk about the stocks that you have to watch out for in trade today. In fact, we have one viewer who is looking for the NMDC price hike. That is what Soumit Sarkar is here to tell you about. Soumit, that's one stock on your list. There are several, I would assume. Good morning.
Good morning, Alex. I'll start off with HDFC. Now, they came out with their quarterly update. Now, HDFC said that they have recorded a fair value gain of nearly 9,000 crore on account of derecognition of investment in Gruh Finance. Their dividend income in the third quarter also doubled to nearly 4 crore versus 2 crore last year. And this quarter, they have assigned loans worth only 4,258 crore rupees as against 7,000 crore reported by the company last year. Hero MotoCorp, their December sales were down nearly 6% to close to 4,24,845 units. Now, this is pretty much in line with the analyst estimate, which was close to 4,30,000 units. GAIL, now they have clarified that there is no amount payable to the Indian government under the internet license that they held till 2017. JSW Energy, now they came out with this notification on the exchanges where they are saying that they have entered into an agreement with JP Power Venture to restructure the principal outstanding amount of 752 crore rupees. Now, of this 752 crore, 352 crore will be converted into equity shares of Jai Prakash Power, and of the remaining 280 crore will be written off, while 120 crore will be paid by the promoter, that is Jai Prakash. Now, Jai Prakash will be paying this 120 crore on a quarterly basis, on priority basis to JSW Energy. NMDC, now they have hiked the prices. For lump, they have set the prices at 2,800 rupees per ton, and for fines, they have set the prices at 2,560 rupees per ton. Now, this is positive for the company because it's the first hike in prices done by the company since May 2019. RITES, the joint venture, has secured orders worth nearly 100 crore rupees from the government of Bangladesh. Natco Pharma, because they have filed an application for a generic version of cancer drug, which recorded sales of nearly $150 million in 2018. And lastly, IIFL Securities, on the back of the bull deal, where Rare Enterprises, that is Rakesh Jhunjhunwala firm, bought nearly 27.84 lakh shares in the company, while Satpal Khattar was the seller.
Thanks so much for that, Soumit. Now, I do have to point out that most of the stories that Soumit spoke about are available on the website if you want to read them in more detail. So is this next one. RBI will conduct simultaneous purchase and sale of government securities for a third time. Now, remember that this is part of the central bank's strategy to bring down term premia. But this time, the Operation Twist, as it is called, that will take place on Monday, is slightly different. Advait Rao Palepu reports.
The Reserve Bank of India has announced its third round of special open market operations, wherein it will purchase and sell government bonds up to 10,000 crores each. The Reserve Bank of India has said that it will purchase 10,000 crores worth of government bonds that mature in 2024, 2026 as well as 2029, unlike its earlier two rounds where it only purchased the 10-year government bond. Further, it also notified shorter-term bonds which mature in 2020 as part of its selling operations. Now, this is part of the Reserve Bank of India's Operation Twist strategy, wherein it tries to flatten the government bond yield curve in order to improve liquidity in the system as well as improve the borrowing conditions for corporate bond issuers.
Just an update, 6.5% was where the 10-year benchmark government bond ended yesterday. It's down about 30 basis points from the high point of December. All right, now, Well, there you have it on your screen there. But let's take you through some of the other stories you'll find on the website BloombergQuint.com. The value of transactions made through the Unified Payments Interface doubled over last year to breach the 2 lakh crore mark for the first time since inception. The platform recorded over 131 crore transactions in December, according to data released by the National Payments Council of India. And Mumbai-based developer Peninsula Land repaid as much as 2.35 crore rupees to State Bank of India on Thursday, according to a person familiar with the matter who spoke to BloombergQuint. Now, on Wednesday, the company had told the stock exchanges that it was in default of principal payments worth 88 lakh rupees and interest payments worth 1.47 crore rupees to SBI's Tara Chambers branch in Pune. That's all you need to know going into trade today, but clearly there's lots to talk about, especially at the start of trade, so do stay tuned. This is BloombergQuint.